Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here. Hi, welcome to the podcast, What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and here with me today we have Zachary Yui, registered acupuncturist, professor, master medical Qigong, and Reiki master and teacher. Thanks for joining us today on a very interesting topic of traditional Chinese medicine involving mental health.
Thanks for letting me pop on here, Sabrina.
Yes, it's great to have you back for our season 2. I was just wondering if you'd like to share anything else about yourself in that intro, and we could jump into learning about Chinese medicine and mental health. Just a really interesting topic.
In terms of intro, I also do classical Chinese medicine as a folk priest and a Wu shaman here. I am a co-owner of Wu Jishuan Life Wellness, where we do Chinese medicine, wellness, Reiki treatments, and results-driven spirituality, courses in education also at 255 Broadview Avenue, Toronto, Ontario, for people that don't know.
Right. So can you tell me about traditional Chinese medicine and mental health? Because we understand about Western medicine and practices healed, right? You may see your family doctor to help with stress, anxiety, depression symptoms. And moving on from there, psychiatrist or psychotherapy. But when it comes to other types of medicine, just wondering if you could share more about what that looks like.
Yeah, I think mental health, at least taken from an Eastern perspective, specifically more on the Chinese medical traditions, it's embodied. It's not just we talk it through. If anything, Chinese culture, we don't talk about anything because unfortunately it's a shame culture. So if you say anything, it looks bad. So it ends up being the solution to that is body work. Issues are in the tissues, as I like to say. And through different metaphors in the body, we're able to access a different map that a person might utilize. So this is where someone comes in for stress, I might look at that and say, oh, you have shoulder pain because they naturally raise up their shoulders and they tighten their neck. And that, to me, might have some different aspects of mental health. Could be anxiety, could be stress, could be anger. There's many different emotional aspects that can happen depending on where it is located on the body for me.
Right. So you're looking at where the person might be carrying those emotions inside their body and noticing, right? Whether it's shoulders.
Absolutely. And giving them a narrative to work through because, when we're looking at general Western culture, most people are looking at things from one perspective. By giving another narrative structure that's completely outside of their goldfish bowl, this is where they're able to say, well, yeah, there's a possibility of healing outside of what they would normally do, which short circuits actually their references of their anchors, as we would say in psychology, like it short circuits all of that by saying, well, let's talk about energy work. And people are like, huh? Right? But we could say, well, that's a metaphor for the subconscious mind, right? At least that's the way I approach it. So then we start looking at this saying like, oh, you got this tension point here. Have you been having X around these symptoms? And the majority of the time people are like, yeah, how did you know? Because we actually combine body theories with emotional theories. There is no separation between either one.
Right. And I found it really interesting when I attended a workshop by Bessel van der Kolk, who's the trauma expert these days, does talk a lot more about Eastern medicine, perhaps in the past, and mentioned September 11th. Most people, after experiencing that traumatic event, went to receive acupuncture versus any other type of treatment. And so that was for mental health, right? And it's so interesting that, that was researched. And I'm just wondering if you could share about energy work and the benefits of acupuncture for for mental health and for stress in the body?
Sure. I think really from a Chinese medicine perspective, the mental health aspects is we're putting needles in the body. That is already going to short circuit a lot of things because, well, I mean, it's needles, it's painful, even on a micro level that your body has to react and not dissociate. I think that's the number one thing about acupuncture or just even things like 20, which is Chinese medical massage, low velocity adjustments, bon fa, even scraping, gua sha, or cupping. These are all body-based release tissue type of modalities. And with using those, you can put that in combination to Qigong. And that's the way I was taught, where you're putting intention, mindfulness, and breathing to maximize what's happening in the body. So I might bring someone to have awareness and say, breathe here and feel it release. Or always context is saying like, yep, this might make you feel angry. Are you okay with that? They say yes or no, depending on what the reaction is. If they say yes, we move forward and then we start really breaking up the emotion, essentially, and starting to get them to accept it, not deny it. That's the first thing. And then from there, the tension you'll see progressively reducing pretty quickly when we start doing these body modalities, but it takes some awareness from the client. Now, if the client wants to say, hey, I want you to do all the work for me. Now we just get into the running joke that it's Chinese medicine is lazy people's Qigong. I'm doing the work for you. So this takes me having the sensitivity to actually understand what's happening with the client. And then I will have to communicate with them saying like, is this right? Like, was even talking with a client even, a few weeks back. And I said, it feels like you have some sadness. And then they're like, well, I don't have any sadness. Well, as soon as someone says, no, I don't, there's a repression point right on that. I said, okay, let me change my language here. I'm thinking of myself. And I said, well, all right, have you been feeling having less energy? Have you been less motivated? Have you cried a little bit? They're like, oh, yeah, I've done that. Right. But the word itself has a stigma with them. So this is where, again, we'll have to kind of play around different words because different words have different associations for people. However, I could still kind of dictate the general ballpark, what that is, through the body references that I have mapped out.
Right. So with traditional Chinese medicine, it's noticing blocks. It's helping to work through it, through those emotions that might be carried in the body, and using energy. And it's like an exchange between the practitioner and the patient.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exchange of the practitioner needs to understand and have awareness of themselves. I mean, people go to school to understand these maps and metaphors from a medical Western standard. I've gone through more classical training, which is more meditative, and you actually feel the problem in a client. But that means, as a practitioner, you need to be able to protect yourself too and not take on those issues. And this is where, we learn to detach from that. We learn how to cleanse and let go of those emotions so it doesn't hinder our own lives or our clinical effectiveness.
Right. Where does our bodies carry these emotions based on traditional Chinese medicine? Is it, in our skeletal system, or is it in our organs?
So that is complicated. I think the best way I would put it is it's in all layers of your body, right? So by the basic mapping that we would teach students in school, it's basically saying lungs are associated with grief and sadness. Kidneys are associated with fear or terror. Heart is connected to joy, but this is what we would say translated as mania and or overstimulation and addiction. The spleen is connected to things like pensiveness or overthinking. And finally, you have the liver that's correlated with anger, right? So we're giving you base raw emotions with that, but then we can also switch these to mental aspects later on if we know how to work with that and say, okay, if you have anger, that means you actually just have motivation. So let's flip that into a more healthy mental sphere. Or if you have grief and sadness, maybe we could switch that into better boundaries, right? These are mental aspects as we can start looking at them. So there's the organ metaphors associated with the emotions, and then you actually have the meridians. Now, in traditional Chinese medicine context, it is your meridians are equal to your organs. However, in classical Chinese medicine, we would actually say, no, there's no emotion stored with the organ correlations. It's just whatever's in the channel or that fascia, because everyone can store it in different places. So this is where there's differing viewpoints on this within Chinese medicine, but traditional Chinese medicine will say it's in the organs. outside other Chinese traditions of Chinese medicine would say, maybe it's in the organs, maybe it's not. Maybe it's stuck in the tissues, maybe it's stuck in certain acupoints, right? So this is where it gets quite pluralistic, or everyone has a different opinion.
Okay. So it's same with Western medicine, maybe different areas of specialty or, looking at the body holistically versus one organ. Interesting. So it can be carried and expressed differently in the body. Everyone's different.
Absolutely.
There would be a sort of assessment to explore what the person's experiencing in terms of symptoms,
Yep. I mean,
where it's being carried.
Yep, the assessment really is tongue and pulse and what we call 10 questions. So the 10 questions reflect, they sound very basic medical questions, but there's more like we're doing the where's Waldo conversations with those. Like it'll be odd questions like, how's your bowel movements? And you're like, well, I don't look at the toilet. I go bathroom once or twice a day type of thing. Same time, to me, if I'm taking it through a metaphorical map, I look at that and say, that's how fast you can release your emotions. That's how fast you can let go of mental stuffiness in your head where you feel kind of stuck, right? Or things like, oh, how's your sleep? Right? That to me is basically saying, well, can you even relax? Right? So there's different interpretations of these questions, even though they're standard body questions, so we can get the organs at the same time and those functions. But we can put it through a different lens and say, this could mean this. And then we take a pulse, which is basically me trying to figure out the rhythm of a person's life overall. So we might have something like wiry. That's it. They describe it as it feels like a guitar string. So this is where it has that tautness to it. I'd be saying, do you feel like you're trapped? Do you feel like you're literally constrained? Because that's what it means. And a lot of people generally have a wiry pulse. It's a common thing. Everyone feels generally constrained in society due to one thing or another thing, due to stress, etc. So that's where we have 28 pulses that we will say, yep, these are general metaphors that have a certain diagnostic pattern. But we can always put that to a mental, emotional level, which I usually do when I teach students and clients. Then we finally have the tongue, which people stick out their tongue, and the tongue basically reflects what's happening in their internal world. So the pulse is showing the rhythm of movement of how they're going about things, the action-oriented things. And then you have the tongue that shows, well, what is the map of their internal world, how they're actually talking to themselves when they're alone, all those types of things where I could look at the internal organ health directly, but it also tells me how things are moving around.
Okay, so you're looking at pretty much a person's organs, movement of the body, flow, circulation, and also sounds like digestive tract from many different ways from what's going on.
We basically go through the full spectrum on every level.
Interesting. And then how the body carries those emotions and how it affects those areas. How could a registered acupuncturist or a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner support someone dealing with stress, anxiety, or depression that may want to see in addition to Western medicine and treatments, how it might help? What would it look like?
Support will look like getting an acupuncture session. This is where everyone in the profession generally is going to be trained on essentially passing a board exam. So they understand the Western side of things. We're always going to look at it from a Chinese narrative structure. Same time, we're going to look at that and seeing how does that complement whatever the Western medicine is saying. So this is where acupuncture is the easiest route. There's lots of different modalities that can be worked around Chinese medicine, not just acupuncture. But it always comes down to what does the client need today? Not what their history is. The history is important. However, what is the present moment that they need today? Because if I don't understand what's happening today and what they want to focus on, I can't move forward if I'm caught up in something in the past. Example pieces might be like auricular acupuncture. That's pretty well known with the NADA approach, which is how to work on different nervous system pieces. Like that's fairly popular in New York. It's fairly popular in different parts of the States and Canada. If affordability is an issue, there's always community acupuncture. If people can afford more of a private acupuncture experience, you have that. So there's lots of different routes around it. It's just what is best suited for what the client needs and what the practitioner can offer. Because the practitioner might not be able to offer all modalities, right? Everyone can offer acupuncture, but even then, there's such a vast array of different styles of acupuncture. Some people they would go for massage therapy and they want a hard massage. That's not going to be the thing that you're not going to go to someone that does a soft massage for that. right? So this is kind of the same thing with acupuncture. There's many different variations, even though everyone's passed a credential just based on their training.
Right. And there's specific areas to target, right? Depending on the issues as well, too.
Yeah, and those issues will have to come through a diagnostic fully. That's why it's what is happening today, right? So if someone said, I'm coming in for anxiety, I'd be saying, well, first, what type of anxiety? It's such a general term to me. Is that the person overthinking? Is that the person being fearful? Is the person like, where do they feel the anxiety? Is it in their head? Is it in their chest? There's so many different places I could put this map to. So I need to be very specific on what is happening with the client and what their reflections and what their experiences are, because that's what I'm going to be basing it from.
Okay. So looking at where they're at and where they're wanting to be. It's really interesting. How does traditional Chinese medicine work preventively to maintain emotional balance before problems escalate? And this is an interesting question because I always think of medicine, again, using that Western world lens of like, not so much on prevention, right? It's really interesting to come from that lens. And what would that look like in terms of preventative work?
Education. I think this is where everyone thinks it's, oh, we book an acupuncture session or we book a Chinese medicine modality and take some herbology, things like that. I think that's where most people's heads are. However, in the actual tradition, that's the last thing we want to worry about. That's intervention. At the point that I have to sit down with you and do an acupuncture session, we've gone too far on the spectrum. Preventively, we want to empower clients to look at their food, dietary therapy, do some acupressure. So teaching them where to massage for their conditions unique to them, teaching them maybe some mindfulness, awareness, Qigong, and energy work. We can even take this more in a classical approach and say, well, let's talk about feng shui. Let's talk about lifestyle, relationship dynamics. All those types of things I think fall into play when it comes to prevention, because Chinese medicine is a part of the client's life. It's not, you just come in when you can. So this is where there has to be a lifestyle change or a few changes, even if it's something simple like, well, drink some green tea or just warm up your food a little bit instead of just having salads all day, right? Like little simple things that are graspable will make a massive change, but you're not going to see it initially. So that's where I think preventive care is actually most important, is approaching it saying, just do one change this week. As long as you can make one habit change, we know psychologically 30 to 40 days is a new neurological habit. So if they can do just one thing a day for a few minutes a day, that's more than enough for me to be happy about doing preventive care for clients.
Right. So just like anything else, if you do it consistently, you'll see the benefits, right? I remember when I was a student, I'm dating myself back in like around 2004, 2006, looking at scholarly articles about Eastern medicine practices, from yoga to acupuncture. And the outcomes were saying, well, it's only as helpful as you use it. But same with cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, or same with mindfulness-based practices, or if a doctor recommends to change your diet, like you said, it has to be consistent in order to see the benefits. So regardless, someone's coming in wants solutions, they need to get you halfway and to try it.
Right. And I think this is where, in the most ideal situation, a practitioner educates a client on what they can do. Whether or not the patient actually chooses to do that or the client chooses to do that, now that is how good the practitioner is. Because if someone's not meeting a practitioner halfway, then it's on the onus of the practitioner to make this success happen. Right. But that is, now we're getting to like very technical skill sets and expertise. So this is where I'm very like, no matter what clients we have, I'm always going to say, these are the recommendations. We give sheets every single time: diet therapy, meditation, exercise, all those things. And I just say, just do one thing. If you can do one thing, that's all I care about. Maybe you do a foot bath, go take a bath, take a soak, whatever it is. Right. And it doesn't have to be super, super complex. I know a lot of people like complexity because it makes them feel like they're doing something. But even something simple like go take a walk for 10 minutes is a good enough start to get things rolling.
Just that action, right? That doing piece. The traditional Chinese medicine and psychotherapy complementing each other when it comes to mental health and well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely complement each other. I have a lot of clients that go to therapy. People are open book here with us as clients, and they say, well, this is what my psychotherapist recommends, and these are my exercises. I'm like, all right, great. I kind of know what we're doing with here because there's a conscious awareness, like a spotlight talking to someone and realizing things yourself. Then there's the unconscious side. I usually say Chinese medicine is about the unconscious side of things, where I'm actually working on your body reactions, where those stored issues are. And then I make them more conscious as I guide people through meditations and just through Chinese medicine psychology, where we're actually using built-in Chinese narratives to say, all right, breathe this color into this organ. Right? But the narrative is very simple. Breathe something good in, breathe something bad out. Now, anyone having a psychology background would be like, well, that sounds really simple. We know how to do this too. It's like, yep, but that's literally the map we're having. So those are all within the Chinese Qigong traditions where we actually start working through that. And then that's where I see a major overlap because they say, oh, yeah, the psychotherapist said this. And I'm like, yep. And they're like, but everything you recommended, they totally are like saying yes to. I'm like, of course they are, because we're coming at it from two different angles, but the goal is the same at the end of the day. It's you having awareness of yourself and giving you the tools you need to support where you want to live and move forward in your dreams.
Right. And there's a lot of overlap too in psychotherapy right now where we're hearing more around quantum physics, energy work, combining mindfulness, which it has moved away from Eastern medicine, but sort of started there. It's completely different now. Now it's practiced for psychology, but it's sort of rooted in symbols. Sure. Definitely can see the benefits.
Yep. I mean, in practice, again, it's my general stance is throw as many tools as you can. Something's going to stick.
So what's one simple traditional Chinese medicine practice people can try at home to support their emotional well-being?
I mean, a simple exercise, even past the traditional Chinese medicine metaphors, is, as we were just saying, breathing something good, breathe out something bad. Find an area of tension and ask yourself, what does this feel like right now? What's the color? And as soon as someone can get a color, then I would start saying, well, what is the five sensory inputs? And we really start looking at this from a tactile five sensory input standard and saying, okay, you have a color, say it's green. How would you describe it? What's the smell? What's the taste? Because our minds like to grasp onto things, but it also doesn't like to think that things are real, right? But the thing is, if you work with multiple sensory inputs, your mind cannot deny that it's real at this point. So this is where the more inputs you can put in. So this is where we make a loose, it doesn't have to be perfect initially, but you might say like, yep, it's green. It tastes bad. What does bad mean? Give me something more substantial. We don't want to use abstract concepts. So then they might say, well, it tastes like green apple. Okay, what else? And then you kind of walk in and it's like, okay, so breathe in the good. You would have to map out what good is for whatever your choice of things are. And then you would exhale the stagnant color that you view as negative. And that's a very easy exercise. And you can place your hand wherever you want on the body that's feeling tension for that.
Right. So you're kind of tuning in, you're leaning into where that pain or discomfort is and tension in the body. If it's in your shoulders, neck, and going towards it, giving it a color, labeling that, emotion, using all the senses to say, if it's not pleasant, what would it taste, smell, feel like? And then with the good, you're doing the same, right? As you're breathing.
Correct. And then basically that's just swapping out what's in your mind and what's in your body directly, because the body is a reflection of your mind and the mind is a reflection of your body. Both are the same thing in Chinese medicine.
Yeah, with the mind and body being interconnected. I don't think sometimes we realize how powerful our thoughts are, the relating to stress, with everything being so connected with our nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great practice. Thanks for giving that example. And I'm wondering, where can listeners go to learn more about these methods we touched on briefly today, learn more about how traditional Chinese medicine, Eastern practices can help with whether it's general stressors or, anxiety and other kind of too.
Right. I mean, in terms of resources, I think the best one is just go to our website, UJIXUAN.ca. We do online consults all the time. We do, if you're in Toronto, just come for a session. Seriously, it's just easier that way. However, if people are listening abroad, we majority of our services aside from acupuncture, we do online, and we do workshops and education on it. So if someone wants to get, say, a Reiki healing, we do that over Zoom. And if people want to learn things, we can do coaching over Zoom also. So distance is not the issue here. It's more along the lines of, did you click the button, go to the website, and email me? That's all you need to do, and we'll figure out something that works for you, whether you're local or you're distant.
Right. So you're still able to use your skills on video and online to assess, to exchange energy. It doesn't necessarily need to be in person.
Absolutely.
It's all very exciting and interesting ways to focus on our well-being, see change. Thanks, Zach, for joining us today.
Thanks, Sabrina, for having me back on again.
And congrats on your courses, on teaching. And if you have any dates, happy to post them as well.
Will do. I'll let you
Thanks.
know. There's a bunch of things happening. So
That's exciting. Thanks for sharing. We're looking forward to the updates.
thank you.